All right, we will go ahead and get started. So welcome, ramp control, the non-movement area, and you, a masterclass in all ground movements. We are mainly focusing on ramp, but there are plenty of topics to be had about the movement area and the non-movement area and how ground and ramp control interact. Here's what we're going to go over today: the movement area versus the non-movement area. Um, FAA. Sorry. There we go. We're going to talk about FAA authority, the FAA versus airport authorities. Talking with vehicles, which is again not going to be super VATSIMI, but will be super great content for understanding the whole position. And airplanes that don't have people on them and don't even have their engines on most of the time. Ramp personnel, how we develop a plan when working ramp, different ways we can coordinate and different people we coordinate with. How we issue clear and concise instructions, and exploring different types of ramp controls, because there is more than one type of ramp control out there. There are quite a lot. So as we continue to move on, you'll see there are plenty of different types of ramp to talk about.
Yep. So here we see basically the two sides of the fence, right? Left side, FAA. That's all your normal stuff that we're used to working on VATSIM. And then the ramps, which are all the non-movement areas, right? Which non-movement doesn't mean that airplanes don't move or aren't being controlled in some way. It just means that the FAA themselves have designated that area as an area in which they do not provide separation services. So there are various entities that do that, and sometimes there is none, and the airplanes just kind of separate themselves, and there might be a dedicated frequency for it, or there might not, and they kind of just close their eyes, look and go sort of thing. So you see like Robinson, Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, EMA, that's the people that I worked for at Dulles, United American Delta, Port Authorities, various different contractors. If Shane will hit the clicky slidey button, you'll see all the airports that belong to each of those airlines and or contractors. So it's kind of this big, messy collection of different people that'll be working the ramp versus, everything outside of the ramp is just simple FAA land. So it gets kind of messy, and as you could imagine, with all these different people doing a similar job, um, they all have rather different ways of getting things done, and they aren't necessarily subject to the rules and phraseology of the FAA. So it gets a little messy, but we'll see that more in a minute. So on that subject, so many different ramp controls operate in such incredibly different ways that it kind of makes it a bit of a challenge to even put on this presentation, because you can't color every ramp control with the same marker, because everything like fundamentally about what they do is going to differ at each place. It's all going to be like custom built for whatever that specific airport setup is. So you'll see like sometimes you'll have normal taxi instructions, and sometimes there are not really any taxi instructions given by the ramp controls at all. And it's a simple like cleared into the ramp or you're cleared out of the ramp sort of situation. Then they call ground once they want to start taxiing around. And not to get too into that because we're going to touch on it later, but as a classic example, anyone who's like listened to Kennedy Steve on YouTube, which hopefully we should all be nerds in this room. Hopefully everyone has listened to a little Kennedy Steve on YouTube. You'll hear them talk about, are you cleared into the ramp, right? So that's a conversation that while the airplane is taxiing and talking to ground, they are expected to be talking to the ramp control already when they're on the far side of the airport. And then the ramp controller says, you are cleared into the ramp. And then the pilot eventually tells ground, yep, we're cleared in. And then they just go do it. That's not the case in a lot of other places. And like where I worked at Dulles, people would do that. And it was the most infuriating thing ever when an airplane would just like call you and you're like, where are you? And he's like on the far side of the airport. And he's like, did ground switch you to me? He's like, no, we're just trying to get the, no, like go back to ground. That's not how it works. We're like basically just another ground control frequency. So it's very different wherever you go. Like you'll see lettered taxi lanes sometimes, like at Dulles. I listed out all the, those are all the taxi lanes that we have in our ramp control, and they're all named like normal taxiways. You'll see a call them taxi lanes though, since they're non-movement. That's the differentiator there. Sometimes you'll see colored lines. A lot of times in de-icing areas, they'll have colored lines. Sometimes lines that are like named in other ways. We couldn't find good examples of that, but I know there are, like some of them are like a something transition, and like I don't know, they could like give us a fancy name to a line that you're supposed to follow, or I guess actually Miami's a decent example. They have some lead-in lines where they just say like left side of the pad, right side of the pad. They have spots, which for anyone who's not familiar, you can see it on the diagram on the right. It's just a literal spot. It's a point on the ground. It's got a circle painted and a number written in it. And that's like a marking that tells an airplane where they can go for whatever it is that the ramp controller is trying to achieve. Um, there's some fancy stuff with like delegating certain pavement back and forth between ground and ramp. Newark is the glaring example, which Shane will get into detail later. Calling ramp to get your gate assignment. God bless Turkish Airlines. Every day, no matter how many times we told them not to, they would call 129.55, the Dulles Charlie Delta ramp frequency. They would call that frequency while they were, I don't know, a little north of New York City, somewhere between New York and Boston. And our transmitters weren't strong enough that he could hear us reply, but he would call us from all the way out there and be like, hey, what's our gate? And it's like, it's Bravo 45, idiot, just like it is every single day. And then he wouldn't hear us. And so he would say, hey, what is our gate? And he would just like continually block all the airplanes during the biggest push of the night. So it was pretty great. Um, as you can see, lots of different problems that crop up when there's not a lot of consistency. The last bullet, advisory service, like some different ramps, like some are kind of mandatory, you have to participate, and others are more like, will like you give us a courtesy call that you're gonna push, and then we can pass that information to other people, but there's not really a strict separation-y thing going on. And we also had pilots who got a little confused about that, and then they would just, start taxiing. It's like, whoa, what you doing? So anyway, you want to take that one, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. All right, so movement area versus non-movement area. Like Eric mentioned, most of us here are nerds and we understand the basic concept. But I will go back to the beginning here, back to understanding the base concept here. So long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, the FAA made a decision at some point that there was pieces of pavement that they wanted to provide air traffic control on, and pieces of pavement they didn't want to provide air traffic control on. Sometimes they would pick the pavement that they wanted to control based on line of sight, whether they could see it or not, or other times it was due to its proximity to the gate buildings, where there was a lot of ground traffic, cars and trucks and all this stuff moving around that they didn't want to deal with. So this is where we get our concept of movement and non-movement, and it's purely based on the FAA side. Movement being the area where the FAA is moving airplanes, non-movement being where the FAA is not moving airplanes. That's where we get our differing terms here: taxiway versus taxi lane. A taxiway is going to be on the is on the movement area every time. Taxiway Charlie is on the movement area. Taxi lane Charlie is going to be non-movement area. Not all charts will depict this as clearly as others, but most places it'll be pretty obvious. And if it doesn't say taxi lane, but it's in the non-movement area, chances are they're referring to it as a taxi lane. Normally, it doesn't make a huge difference to the pilots, but it does make a difference to the airport designers in respect to wingtip clearances. So as you can see down here, in this one down here, wingtip clearances for taxiways and taxi lanes, the numbers differ by quite a bit by design group. So for those of you who don't know, by aircraft design group, those are aircrafts divided into different groups based on wingspan and weight. generally. So ADG-6, there are not many ADG-6 aircraft. The A380 is one of them. I believe the 748 is considered ADG-6, but it's not considered a super. And the Antonov 225 is considered ADG-6. And then I think there's some military aircraft that fall into it, maybe the C-5. But ADG-5 is typically the upper limit of what most people will see, especially on VATSIM, because we don't have too much for the simulator that goes much above that. These are your big heavies, your regular 747-400s, your 777s, all your big heavies. 4 goes down into the lower level of heavies, and then it keeps going down. 3 are our 737s, A321s, 2s down to twin props, maybe some RJs depending on the wingspan and weight. But you can see the numbers differ by anywhere from 5 feet to there's a 7-foot difference right here, 6.5-foot difference right here, 6 or 5.5-foot difference here. It differs by design group. I don't really know why they chose. This is what the FAA chose. This is all this comes from an advisory circular for airport designers, and the movement area and non-movement area has different wingtip requirements, which is a lot of the reason why you'll actually see aircraft pass each other a lot closer on the non-movement area than you will in the movement area, because the wingtip requirements are lower and they can fit more lines into a finite piece of pavement where planes are allowed to pass each other. Um, there is something important to clarify: non-movement versus uncontrolled. So ramp control controls the non-movement area, and like I said, it's FAA centric. So it's non-movement from the FAA's perspective, but from the airport authority or whoever has decided to work the ramp space, whether it's the airport authority, the airlines, or whoever it is, has decided that this area is now to be controlled for one reason or another. It might be because of congestion, it might be because there's complexity in the ramp, and it might be because their pilots kept blocking each other in and they kept facing delays, so they insisted on controlling the ramp because that's what they needed to do. Um, Shared non-movement and movement area. So I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the actual diagrams of different ramps. But Newark is a really good example of this. They have something they call the expanded ramp procedures, where ramp control actually gets a big portion of the movement area to use, and they can maneuver their airplanes while on the ramp control frequency into the movement area, and that mainly is to alleviate congestion in the ramp area and assist the flow of traffic out of the non-movement area into the movement area. There are also plenty of opportunities for ramp and ground to coordinate and use the non-movement area and movement area between each other. Many times I'd get a phone call from the tower saying, "Hey, this guy, there was construction here, whatever. This guy gets stuck behind a line, somebody waiting for an ESP release, and like, hey, can we cut him through the ramp this way?" And we coordinate that, we work that out with each other, and we get people where they need to go. Um, I'll take this one, and then you'll do the next one.
Yeah.
So vehicles and ramp personnel, a couple of good ideas of what ramp personnel might look like. I'm sure some people here understand. Um, I'm sure some people understand and have seen these mobile lounges. Eric will go into these a little bit more in depth on the next slide. But these are very common ground movement vehicles at Dulles. They're used to move passengers between terminals. So they were always moving around and buzzing around on the non-movement area at Dulles. Then we have fuel trucks. We had a lot of fuel trucks. Sometimes they weren't the tankers. Sometimes it was just a guy in a truck, and they'd go use the stuff underneath. But generally speaking, we had a lot of fuel trucks move around. A lot of times they'd be blocking stuff. I'd have to make a phone call every now and then, be like, "Hey, can you tell the guy who parked at A18 to move? Somebody would like to park there very badly." And then I'd hear them go, "Oh, sorry," hang up the phone, and 30 seconds later the guy would speed off very quickly. And then pushback tugs. These are some of the most common things you'll see in the non-movement area. Connected. Sometimes they'll be running around by themselves. Other times they'll be connected to big old airplanes. Um, A lot of airports, they have different overnight spots for parking, and a lot of times you'll have the airline schedule their flights in such a way that a flight will come in, reposition to the overnight spot, and then the next flight will come in to take over the gate it was occupying. So you'll have a lot of empty airplanes moving along the ramp at many different hours of the day. I have a little clip for everybody.
Ooh.
Eh, doesn't want to work? Why not? That's upsetting. Hello? Hold on. There we go.
Kilo Golf, Shuttle Alpha requesting Hotel Bravo. Delta Tag 1, follow American Airlines on Bravo. Follow American Airlines on Bravo, Delta Tag 1.
So I'm sure those nerds in here are familiar with that. That is Mr. Kennedy Steve talking to a an airline tug that is repositioning on the movement area actually, but it is a really good example of how we have interactions with tugs on the non-movement area as well.
Before you jump ahead, actually, if you want to go back briefly,
Oh, I'd love to.
I just realized that we had like, there's like three levels of tug. There's like crappy tug. There's that yellow tug, which is like a, I don't know, nice. Well, they're the ones they'll use to push the heavier things like that as a, I don't know, what is that? A330? I think doesn't look Boeing-y. I don't know. Someone's probably gonna
Yeah.
correct me, and then I'll be embarrassed, but whatever. It's clearly a heavy. It's a wide body, and that's why that's that middle level tug. And then the top level tugs that are fancy, the super tugs, which are the ones that are at the bottom. They look like that, and they like grab the nose and like the nose gear, and they literally lift it off the ground, and then they just drive it around. Pretty nifty stuff, and they go really fast. And they're the ones that, like I said, actually they do have a lot of medium tugs that are always calling Kennedy Steve, but you'll hear super tugs too, I think. Anyway, moving on. I just couldn't let the super tugs go without being discussed because they're awesome. Not as awesome as these things, though. EQ loves mobile lounges. I don't really know why they're called mobile lounges. I mean, it makes sense because it's, you know, people call them buses, which I guess from the scale of like the picture on the right, they kind of look like a bus, but from the scale to picture on the left, like these things are absolutely colossal. It's like a giant, it's like a hallway or like a big ass room. Sorry, maybe I can't say that. Fat USA sponsored profanity. Apologies. It's just enormous, and I don't know. They're super cool. They're super unique. They're also super dumb. It's This is the only way that anyone who's ever flown into Dulles as an international arrival is going to have to ride on one of these things because they put the customs facility is like one building that's like enormous, but it's on like the far corner of the airport that no one parks anywhere near. So they have these like glass corridors inside, like you'll see on the right, and you'll walk down this hallway and go into a mobile lounge, and then that mobile lounge has to talk to the ramp, or sometimes they have vehicle roads and they can kind of take you over there. So anyway, long story short, they're pretty neat, and you can see on the right, I guess, like a glimpse of the hassles that some vehicles will create, right? So there's like the little white one that's driving on the vehicle road. It's a little harder to see, but if you see the one that's kind of above Speedbird Dead Center, Shane, if you could point to him. Yeah, that guy's a little Bud Lounge, which is the one that looks more like a bus than the White Plane Mates. And he's just doing a little shuttle back and forth between the other terminals. And the dock that he's going to is kind of like on the left edge of the screen. I don't know if you can quite see it, but anyway, um,
I've,
dealing with vehicles was a big part of that. Yeah, what's up?
sorry, I've been asked to correct you. The aircraft you called an A330 is actually a 777.
Is it a 777? I mean, it looked like it was something about the windows that didn't feel right.
I can't quite count the mains. I can't see if
Yeah,
there's
I
three.
can't. Yeah,
I think there might be. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I said someone was
Somebody
gonna
somebody
correct
said
me.
with confidence it was 300, so maybe it is a 300, but it's hard to see.
Yeah, I'd believe him. I just want to see the wingtips, then I could get it. Anyway. So yes, EQ loves mobile lounges, and then the cool thing about them is that this can happen. They can mate with each other, which has to happen more often than you would think because they're such pieces of crap that they break down all the time, and then you have to empty all the people off of one and get them onto another in order to get them somewhere other than where the one is stranded. But goofy little vehicles. They're unique to Dallas, although I guess not entirely. Like Denver has them, but they're not used even 5 to 10% as much as they are here. So an odd little quirk.
All right, more about ramp vehicles and personnel. I'll play a little game here. Let's see who knows their airports. What airport is this? This is a service road here. What
It's
airport
more
are we
like
looking at?
Rudolph.
You guys just put it in chat. See anyone who knows? Oh, wow. First guess. Good job, Lauren. This is O'Hare. This is a service road that is in the movement area. So here's the non-movement area line right back here. Just a fun fact. They have an LOA with all these vehicle operators who basically are allowed to go in and out through the movement area like this in these service roads as long as they give way to airplanes. You can see stop bars right here, well clear of the taxiways. And occasionally a bus pulls in front of a CRJ, and there's a delay at O'Hare for a little while, but not super common. I think people are gonna have trouble with these two. These two are actually the same airport. Can you guess these two right here? This middle one and this one up top here. Yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna be able to get this one. If any of you do, I'll be impressed. No, not Houston, not DFW, not Midway, not Denver. Yeah, no. This is Kansas City, actually. This is MCI. This is the new ramp, which is why I didn't think most of you would get it. Oh, someone said it right as I said it. Maybe you knew it. This is probably one of the newest ramps in the NAS. You know what? This is not too many N's because it could be worse. There actually is a fourth N that's not showing here. This is November 1, 2, and 3. There is a November 4. Yeah, this ramp is very brand new. But what I'm illustrating here is service roads backed up right up against the edge of the movement area. This was a real big hotspot for us because we'd have there's it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see the shadow being cast right where I'm pointing. They come up this service road and it's actually a hill upwards. They're underneath the pavement here. So sometimes they'll get to this stop bar and they won't actually come to a stop, which is a problem. And they'll just jump out right in front of here. And I've had many a Delta 717 get cut off trying to make this turn like this by an international garbage truck coming through. And we'll just cut them off. And the ramp controllers are not the ramp police, but whenever planes had to step on their brakes, somebody got a phone call, and we said, hey, that can't happen. We were also in a much more sensitive spot because we were brand new. People weren't used to ramp control, and people weren't used to the ramp, and they were just kind of used to what they were doing before. So they're not used to where the airplanes are going to go, what their predictability is, and they weren't used to the fact that people were watching them make mistakes like that and get caught. Over here is the backside of this ramp, so these lines actually lead along like this and come back to here. I probably could have switched these around to be a little more sensible. This service road right here runs behind the gates, and right back here is a blast fence. And we basically forced the vehicles to go behind these blast fences because aircraft would push like out of here, and they needed to go behind these blast fences because if they pushed onto the center line here, they could easily get pushed off the service road. There are lines right here, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we go into the more in-depth discussion on these airports. These were disconnect points where we had to pull planes forward from their push so that they didn't do any damage to. There's a bunch of baggage servicing areas in here and a whole bunch of garages, and so they wanted everyone to get pulled forward who were pushing onto these lines. If they pushed onto this line, then it was protected by the blast fence. So this area was again somewhere we had to look for vehicles. Normally they were pretty good about it, but occasionally we'd see somebody be stupid and like cut this corner while somebody was like starting their engines facing this way, and it would be bad looking. So we generally would catch it and be like, hey, that guy's got to move, or hey, can you have the ground crew turn you a little bit further so you're pointing the fence, stuff like that. Last one, bottom right hand corner. Anybody for bottom right hand corner? Eric, do you know what the bottom right-hand corner is?
Anyone who doesn't know which one it is, it does have a very helpful clue with the size of the vehicle roads.
Also, these things right here are pretty
Also, those things.
abnormal. This is Dulles. Two of you got it right off the bat. This is indeed Dulles. The vehicle service roads, like Eric said, they're huge for those mobile lounges. But also, these are those mobile lounge docking gates we were talking about on the last slide. There we go. Oh, does that look terrible? What's going on there? Wow. These right here. Sorry, it looked weird on my screen. So these right here are. Oh, come on. That's so weird. Oh, there we go. Are right here on this side. Maybe it's just my screen going crazy. Yeah, it is, I guess. Okay, they're right here. So this is Dulles. Again, big service roads, and these show you service roads that are going across the non-movement area. We had a couple of those at Kansas City, but these just literally go straight across like this. And they obviously have to give way to airplanes, and that we had problems with that as well. People would get caught sort of sometimes. They'd get caught in the middle of the taxi lane waiting for a truck to move that was parked behind an airplane, a whole bunch of stuff. And it basically left the guy stranded out in the middle of the taxi lane while a big old A320 was barreling towards him, and there was nothing for him to do except back up and try and get out of the way. So it's especially these that leave them out in no man's land. It's incredibly important that they clear the other side of it and make sure that they get through it. A lot of times the vehicles, though, most of them aren't on frequency because they don't have radios. So it a lot of times will come down to we had a zoom camera that we could use to try and pick up on them, and we have some pictures of our respective ramp towers later on, and you'll see what I mean. And we could try and pick up the company and be like, call the company and tell them to have the people move. But sometimes it was hard to get a hold of them and tell them to move because they would just be stuck and they wouldn't even realize that they were blocking something.
Shane, that's super secret. Never before seen bonus content, only for our paid subscribers.
Okay.
Oh yes, here we go. So this is just a quick video of the snow removal team, snow crew. I don't remember what they call themselves, but big long line of vehicles that this is obviously a bit different from something you normally deal with. They kind of just have this giant long train and then they do the whole snow removal thing, and by the time the end of the line gets there, it's nice, beautiful, clean pavement, at least theoretically. So
Very
pretty
cool.
neat.
Many snow plows. Hello, come on. There we go.
Yes, Gia pointing out that I haven't been there in a while. Yeah, they redid the whole side of the south side of the Echo gates. Apparently they're parking like A320s at most of them now. They had like 320s in like 3 or 4 of them like on the west side, but now they're apparently all capable, which is pretty nifty. How time flies, I guess.
All right, let's talk about some different types of coordination. Some of these terms are going to be super familiar to some of you, and some of you might not be. These aren't really terms that we necessarily go into super well on VATSIM because they generally aren't really that well used. They used to be. If you are old enough to be pre-AFV, which isn't that old, but if you've been a controller before AFV, you'd remember that VRC, VSTARS, and VERAM all had their own built-in audio stuff, and we were able to do these different types of coordinations. But these are how we use them in the real world. So first and foremost, the shout lines. They are very self-explanatory. You scream at the top of your lungs into them, and then the other guy gets mad at you for yelling so loud. No, so what they do is you hit the line, and you're immediately in the speaker of the facility you're calling. And they hear whatever the coordination call is. So I'll give you the example that we use in the real world at DuPage. It'll be Sector 3, referring to the South Satellite Sector, DuPage, and then what we're looking for, release. Similar to the ramp control stuff, it would be something along the lines. We didn't have shout lines at Kansas City, but if we did, we'd say something like, hey, ground, ramp, APREC. and the ground controller would have the opportunity to hit the line, pick it up, and then we'd both be hot mic talking to each other. Dial lines are one way are typically just phone lines that are built into the system. So what we had were buttons that just said GC, LC, or TWR on them, which were the tower soup, and it would pick up a recorded line and then call the whoever we were picking up. So if we hit GC, it would dial the number and then it would ring to the ground control position, and then they'd hear it in the tower ringing, they'd pick it up, and then we'd coordinate. Multi-dial lines, those are shared lines. So in the Chicago Tracon, the line we use there is called the 3GL2. We didn't have one of these at our ramp, but basically they were landlines that were shared across different facilities, and you can use them to call different people, but they don't necessarily ring to each one. So you'd pick up one of those shared landlines, and there would be a line you'd call. So when we need to call, say, the Tracon, we pick them up, we dial 72, and that'll ring to the Tracon TMU. If somebody else was going to pick up that shared line and try and make a call, they'd hear me conversing with the Tracon TMU. But generally speaking, it's not super common that it happens. Because, typically we're not making that many landline calls like that. We'll use the shout line or other things like that. But some facilities will have these dial lines where you pick it up, dial some shortened code, and it'll ring to whoever you want. And then if somebody else were to try and pick up the line, they'd hear you all talking and conversating. You might ask how you avoid, talking over each other. There is etiquette for them. You're supposed to listen before you do anything, just like any frequency, and then kind of questionably but demandingly so state line clear as a question. And if somebody replies, it'll be with something like line in use or in use, and they're letting you know that there's a conversation going on. You just can't hear it right now because, or you didn't hear it because we're doing something else or whatever it is. So that hasn't happened to me personally. And multi-dial lines are not super common in the ramps, but they do exist. And then overrides. Overrides are pretty self-explanatory when you kind of understand them at a base concept, but normally they're intra-facility communication, where you'll dial a code or hit a button and you'll hear like a little beep sound, and the other person will hear a little beep sound, and they'll acknowledge the override. So we don't use them very frequently, but if I were to override the local control position, I'd override, they'd hear a little like a little tone, and they would say something along the lines of "go ahead" or "override local," something like that. Yeah, Joe is right. We do just say line clear and then start dialing regardless of what's going on. But yeah, you override, and typically you wait for the other controller to acknowledge that you've overridden them. If they don't, then you can kind of get their attention, but it hot mics you both instantly. So you're kind of overriding their whole landline setup. You're hitting the override button, and it's an immediate right into their headset. You hear them, they hear you. And if you hear them talking, they're obviously on frequency. So you kind of let them finish. And if they don't hear the tone, then you can try and get their attention. Like, hey, I want you, and whatever else. Prearranged coordination. So we had a lot of prearranged coordination where we could move airplanes up a taxiway without coordination if they were talking to us. So when we get into it, I'll show it a little bit more. But if they switched them to us on taxiway Bravo, we could move them wherever we needed to on Bravo within the limitations of our ramp entry points without coordinating with them. And they could do similar things once we've sent them out. Once we've sent that airplane out, we kind of use Bravo as a shared zone. So if we switch them and ground is talking to them, the assumption is we've moved our traffic out of the way from them, and they should not be worried. So a lot of times we'll have airplanes on Bravo who are going to enter before wherever the guy's exiting, and our switch is indicative of that. We give the switch. We've said that's effectively us saying we've eliminated all conflicts, and that was the way the letter of agreement read between us and the tower. So if we did it, it was that way. That is how it worked. And if somebody didn't, they were in violation of the letter. Use of movement, non-movement areas, or coordinating use of movement and non-movement area, typically with an app rec. I saw somebody ask the question what an app rec is. Joe explained it really nice in the chat, but I will say it verbally for those who don't know what the term app rec means. It's a shortened term for the it's a shortened and condensed way to say approval request, which I think is a really dumb statement, but it's basically saying I have something I'd like to ask you, and I'd pretty please like you to say yes. It's spelled APREQ for those of you who don't know what it actually looks like. App rec. And typically you just use it to preface that you're about to make something, you're going to request something that's either abnormal or you're going to request something that is normal, but you just need to make the request for whatever reason. So you preface it, and it'd be, hey tower, it'd be ground ramp app rec. And they'd pick up the line and go ahead, and you'd go into it a little bit more, and you'd give them the full app rec, the whole information. Apper Wrecker. Thank you, Chris. I hardly know her, by the way. So yeah, that is how we would coordinate the use of movement and non-movement areas. We will move on to Mr. Quinn with different types of pushes.
Oh yes. It can get messy, as to be expected. You can get like as crazy and detailed as you want to with this. You can kind of just tell them pushback approved, and there's like a bunch of different ways that you want to give them some sort of indication of, unless it's obvious and there's only one choice, like you'll also tend to know by the carrier, like Southwest only pushes straight back, and all the Brickyard CRJs would always push straight back, but the Brickyard 175s, could push on the line or straight back, and all the United mainliners would push on like a 45-degree angle. And you can specify exactly what you want them to do. So if you want them to push straight back, you can generally tell them to push straight back, unless like you can't have a heavy push straight back because then the engines are aimed, across the ramp at the other gates. So that's trash. They're not going to do that. And some of the crews are only trained to push straight back, and they don't know how to do the counter steering thing to get the tail to move around. So there's like, I don't know, I make the thing straight and then I hook it up and then I push the airplane backwards and then I unhook, and that's all I can do. But anyway, for capable crews, you can specify like push and pull. That would be like you push them out onto the line, and then you can have them pull forward. So like our phraseology for that was push approve, face west on the center line, and then pull forward, nose abeam, gate Charlie 7, or something like that. And you could also just have them, so it says like deep versus shallow. So you could specify like pushback approve, face west, push shallow. That would mean only use the minimum space that you really need to get the airplane out there, and don't waste space because I need what's behind him. Or you could say push deep. So like push approve, face west, and push deep, nose abeam something. So like if you have two airplanes that are right next to each other, you could, say you're pushing them back onto the center line such that they're going to be positioned behind, like directly behind the other plane, and you think the other guy might be ready to push. You could just have them keep pushing the other one until he's out of the way, and then in theory the other one could be pushed if he did call for it. Yeah, so we said straight back, face a direction. Also, you'll see my cute little comment that I put in late so Shane couldn't catch it. Ew, don't say tail, gross. This is a style thing. Some ramps do say tail, like, push approved, tail south, tail north. It is like easier for the ground crews, kind of, I guess. I mean, not really. I just find that strange, but it's a thing. We just think
We
it's
use
dumb. Did
tail.
you use tail?
Yeah, it was the
Hot
standard.
trash. I
Yeah,
don't get who came up with that idea,
it
but
was SOP for us to use it. That was written into our operating procedures that we were supposed to use tail. Um,
it's written
it
into
it
ours, but we don't. So.
yeah, yeah, it's a style thing. Different ramps, different decisions.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point that you'll see in this as we continue, is that nothing is consistent because nothing is defined, right? The 7110 unites all FAA facilities in how we do ATC, but ramps kind of do whatever they like. Partial push, that's like a weird example. I think, yeah, in one of the later slides, you'll see an example of that. If there's like a lot of times it's those tiny little terminals they make for the regional jets, where they'll have like a bunch of gates crammed into a corner and then like a tiny alleyway that they all feed into, and then that comes out to like the main taxiway. So you could theoretically have someone start their push into the alleyway but not actually go out onto the taxi lane yet. That'd be a partial push. Or sometimes they'll even um, because they want to get their off blocks time, they want to start their pushback, and they're like, can we start our push but we'll still stay clear of the vehicle road and off the ramp? It's like, yeah, sure, you can push a couple feet back from your own gate to still on your own gate. On the 45, obviously that's specifying, on a 45-degree angle, reference the line that they're going to taxi out on. And in some cases, not in mine at Dulles, but elsewhere, there might be spots that are located in a way that, like how I a moment ago described, push approved, face west in the center line, push deep, nose abeam, Charlie 7. You could just say push, to spot 15, because that's like a standard place that they want the airplane to be put because it doesn't block other stuff. So lots of different ways to get that done, and it can get complicated as you start to combine them.
Developing a plan. So just like everything you're ever taught here on VATS and in the real world is develop a plan and try and stick to it when you can. And when you can't, you got to be adaptive and make changes to your plan and overcome problems, especially when you work in Area 4 in Atlanta Center and the problem is staffing. Things to consider when developing your plan: taxiway/taxi lane restrictions. So there's going to be a lot of places that have restrictions of where airplanes can and can't taxi, what airplanes can and can't pass each other. That's a big thing at O'Hare on the taxiways. Two large or two heavies can't pass each other on Alpha and Bravo at O'Hare. So it's a ground control and also kind of a ramp control issue. If ramp is gonna feed ground some hot garbage, and the only solution is to let them hit wingtips. Typically, that won't be the only solution, and most people will be very aware of the taxiway taxi lane restrictions and make sure that type of stuff doesn't happen. Kansas City, we had lines that were designated for ADG-4s and bigger, so the 757 and a few other different types of aircrafts. So they had to use those lines. If they didn't use those lines, chances are they would take the tails off of the airplanes that were parked on the gate. Real story, one night after we closed, we were not a 24/7 operation. There was an issue with a 757 going in somewhere they weren't supposed to, taxiing down a lane they weren't supposed to, and then eventually making it to their gate. But it really, luckily, they didn't hit anything. But because they had all like 717s and CRJs parked for the night. But if there was a 73 or an A321 parked, it probably would have taken the tail off of a plane, and it would have been a really bad night. So that type of stuff. Normal ramp flow. So Dulles especially, we didn't have such a strong flow at Kansas City, but Dulles especially, I know, has a really strong flow. You're supposed to come in one way, leave the other, and I'll let Eric talk about that a little bit more when we get to discussing about Dulles. So ramp flow is something you really got to consider. You don't want to be feeding things weird to your ground controller when they don't expect it. So coordinate anything abnormal. Undue delay. You don't want to delay somebody unnecessarily in the interest of conveniencing somebody else. There is a lot of ways that you can attempt to avoid delay for somebody, and we have some scenarios we'll go over in a little bit that'll kind of show you where planes can get stuck for a while. And really, your goal is to eliminate the undue delay. Sometimes there's unavoidable delay that you just got to take, and you got to work it into your plan. And you're going to be like, all right, he's going to wait a few minutes, and that's that. Using creative solutions. There's a bunch of creative solutions. Switching lines, doing the Kennedy Steve double back. Our ramp was wide enough people could make 180s to the parallel line most of the time. One time I saw a Southwest really do something sketchy and make a 180 within the same line. They shouldn't have done that. I didn't say yes to it, but they just kind of did it. And then there is my personal favorite is the zigzag. there is Eric Quinn tells a very good story about a coworker of his at Dulles who used a very good piece of phraseology, which is zigzag as required. Is that
No, you
about right?
kind of
No,
get it all wrong.
go,
Yeah,
no, go.
so
You
you'll
go
you'll
ahead. You
see
go ahead.
you'll see a picture at a ramp in a minute, but it's the busiest position is the Charlie Delta position, which if you look at it from space, it looks like a whole bunch of nothing. In fact, one of the old guys who washed out from there was famously quoted forever for saying the day that he showed up, he walked up there and looked out the window and he's like, huh, well, it's just one big flat piece of concrete. How hard could it possibly be? He did not succeed. But anyway, it was on that Charlie Delta position, and because it really is, it's just a flat piece of concrete with two two lines, and that's it. East to west lines, and the south side of one terminal, north side of the other. You could push off of both of them, and then you would just maneuver them between the left and the right taxi lanes. They could, move freely. It's not like there's connectors or anything. It's just like they'll be on one center line. You tell them to move the other one. They make a bit of a right turn. They join the other center line, and you can kind of bob and weave them around the traffic. And so you'd be given weird instructions like, turn right and then join Charlie. I'll have further for you in a moment. He just like turns to the right, joins the center line, starts taxiing, and then you like start calling the traffic to him. Be like, okay, at hold at this gate, or like give way to this guy who's going to join from the left, and then go right to left around this stop traffic and hold a beam this gate. And so you're given like this step by step stuff. And so his name was Clyde. He had this situation where he had one guy all the way at the east end of the ramp who needed to go to spot 80, which is at the west end of the ramp. And the planes that had pushed from both the south and north sides of the ramp were staggered in such like a beautiful way that it's formed like a bit of a zipper shape. So there was like this. It would have to describe it properly would have been so complicated and lengthy. But it was clear that there was a path that was just big enough for the guy who was way over there where Shane's little red dot is to get to spot 80. He just had to go left and right and left and right a bunch of times. And so, being the cowboy controller that he was, he goes, United 988, you know where spot 80 is? Yes, sir. Weave as necessary. The ground controller is on point 62. And that was his literal clearance. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it did work. It got the job done. But yeah, us younger folks would not have gotten away with it. I'll tell you that for cheap. Weave
That
as
is
necessary.
that is still one of my favorite stories Eric tells from Dulles. But that weave is necessary as our zigzag there. We did a lot of that at Kansas City as well, moving people to different lines. And I have a good example of where we did and didn't need to use it. And it was a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, be adaptive. If at first you do not succeed, try again. If you make a mistake, that's okay. I mean, ramp control is luckily a very I don't want to say an easy position. You have an advantage in ramp control that you do not have in any other position in the entirety of the National Airspace System. The airplanes can go backwards and forwards. It is truly remarkable. There's a lot to be accomplished by asking the captains to leave the tug connected. And we had to do that maybe once or twice, but you can do so much nonsense in the real world by asking them to leave the tug connected. And you probably can get away with it to some degree in VATSIM as well, depending on the pushback method that people are using. Better pushback, especially, you can get away with it. Versus some of the GSX stuff, but there's absolutely a way. You know what? That's a great question. This is pretty on point, so I'll bring this up, Daniel. Would coordinating pushes with aircraft on the network be different than in real life, since it would be hard for pilots on VATSIM to understand push shallow or zigzag? Yeah, I would say you run into some struggles there on VATSIM, especially because we. As ramp controllers in the real world, we're talking kind of professional pilots. These are the cream of the crop. There are no bet. No, these guys are idiots too. I don't mean to spoil it, but real world airline pilots are just as scary as VATSIM airline pilots sometimes. They're like it truly baffles me the way some of these people think. So yeah, I mean, even in the real world, we'll give a clearance that they don't understand, and it makes perfect sense to what what we're looking at, but they don't have the whole picture. structure, and then I'll have a whole bunch of stuff. So my point here would be clear, be clear, be very concise and very clear with what you want, and try and give them as much descriptiveness as to accomplish the task as you can. There's only so much you can do for people who will not read the chart and people who don't know what they're doing. So you're going to get some people who will be fantastic at this and will be able to help you out in a pinch. And then you're going to get people that you're going to say, push shallow a beam Bravo 42, and they're going to push, 8 gates deep onto a taxiway. And you're going to be like, well, that wasn't what I was hoping for. But yeah, so this is a great question. VATSIM does have a very big barrier here. Regardless of the many language barriers that exist in VATSIM in the real world, there's just purely the telephone game to be played here. So in the real world, generally speaking, the person talking on the radio while an airplane is taxiing, for most American carriers, Delta, American, United, and all their subsidiaries, it's almost always the first officer, because the captain is always taxiing, and the captain is the one talking to the ground crew. So generally, what will happen is the first officer will say, "Hey, Ramp, we're ready to push at Bravo 41." You'll issue a push instruction. The captain's probably not listening. The first officer then needs to write down or memorize exactly what was said, and then Malik in his 777 looks to his captain who hasn't been listening and says, all right, they want us to push shallow a beam Bravo 46 and then pull forward to a beam Bravo 42, and then they want us to let somebody by and then push deeper again. And the captain goes, screw that, we're pushing straight out. And then they push straight out. That happens. It's absolutely real, and VATSIM people will do that to you as well. And I've been told stories of people who will just push the wrong way because in their mind, quote, it made more sense to them, and instead of the ramp controller letting them get away with their nonsense, the ramp controller instead delayed them about 45 minutes because they were going to delay other people about 50 minutes. So they got delayed for not facing the right way. They went right to the back of the line. So it happens. It happens quite a bit. Yeah, exactly, Joe. Joe Kaiser points out at Atlanta they had one where people will just do 180s in the non-movement area, and that happened to us all the time. Like I said, a pilot pulled into a gate, did a 180 in a way that he should not have done without me saying yes, and then taxied to the right gate. After I insisted that he was going to the wrong gate, and then he's like, no, this is the gate, Then he pulled up to the gate and he goes, oh, never mind, you were right, and made a 180. And luckily there was no one else there, but if there was, it would have been a little bit of a nightmare. Anyway, we'll move on, and I will let Eric talk about his wonderful Dulles.
Wonderful Dulles. Yeah, these are kind of just examples of different places. So we're not going to get into too much detail here, but obviously here's Dulles. The ramp is a big square. It's kind of like you might not think it, but the majority of the taxiways, at least the meaningful taxiways, are like all controlled by ramp. Like ground doesn't have very much going on, honestly, especially because all the complexity happens in there, and it's kind of like chaos. And then they come out all sorted, prim, and proper, and all ground has to do is runway 30, taxi via Zulu Yankee 11, 30, taxi via Zulu Yankee 11, runway 1 right, taxi via Juliet, 1 right, taxi via Juliet. Like, I don't know, whatever. I digress. Let me see. So specifics of Dulles. It's kind of treated like the ramp is kind of like a taxi or like a ground control, right? So they're given taxi instructions, they're giving push clearances out onto named taxi lanes. There's no call ahead to get a clearance into the ramp. There's no such thing as that. Ground will just give them, some taxiway, sort of some other taxiway, and they'll switch them to our frequency. They'll call us, say, we're northbound on Juliet, short of Delta, and we'll tell them taxi to the gate via Delta, and then they go left on Delta and go to parking. So almost like it's not even anything different than ground, except that it's not controlled by the FAA.
I'll bring up this question because it's pertinent to where we're at right now.
Sure. There are 3 and 3 and 2 halves. So there's 3 is the real answer, and they're labeled even. Look at that, nice. It's the north, the midfield, which I don't know. No one really calls it this. They call it A, B, C, D, and EF. Or as I was trying to get them to say, ramp alpha, ramp Charlie, and ramp echo. That never caught on. So like on the landlines, because we have a shout line to talk to the tower. So like ground on the east side was ground 1, ground 2 in the west, and ground 3 was like further to the south. So like you would call them as, ground 3 Charlie Delta, and then they would pick it up and you would say whatever you wanted to say. Or with Gia's example, when we were constantly calling to try to push Charlie 1, which you see Charlie 1 down there, when you push Charlie 1, they had to face to the west. The tail would have to go out into the taxiway into Juliet. So we couldn't push Charlie 1 without getting ground to give away a piece of Juliet so that we could do that. And so we would just constantly be saying, ground 1, Charlie Delta, ground 1, ground 1, hello, ground 1, Charlie Delta. You just sit there doing that for like a couple minutes, and then you take a break, call them back again, work some traffic, call them back again. They just never answered. I don't know. It's pretty brutal, but life goes on. And then the de-ice, which I alluded to in text, I think, or maybe I wrote it in a slide. I don't remember. That all happened down in the like the southwest corner of the ramp there, the R22 to R28 gates, which we weren't involved with it while it was happening, but we did kind of work them all into and then out of that area. So.
I will answer the second part of the question, which is there ramp control at DCA? There isn't.
Oh yeah, I guess I forgot what I was talking about. So the as to the answers to that, because I said 3, which obviously you could see what the 3 were, right? AB is 1, CD is 2, EF is 3, and then I said there were 2 halves. There's a mobile lounge dispatch position, which ironically was like almost my favorite position, which isn't really ramp control related. I guess it's very Dulles specific, so I'll keep the commentary to 15 seconds or less, which is like all the little lounges that are running around, not the ones that are just shuttling, the ugly gray ones, but the white plane mates with the horns out the top. Those were all dispatched to pick up the international arrivals, and that was all handled via a very complicated and antiquated system that was like highly entertaining to do, and that was done up in the ramp control tower. And then the second half was a de-ice position, which we would like split out of the Echo Fox position, and we only did it like twice as an experiment. I don't honestly know if they've continued it since I left, but it was this, I don't know, it just, that Echo Fox position when de-ice was going on was just so completely insane that you would lose your mind trying to do it. And so being able to take all the de-ice crap out of your workload was very helpful. So there's your 3 and your 2 halves, and there's no ramp control at DCA. It's all like uncontrolled non-movement.
Very good. All right, Denver.
Yeah, Denver. Is this my slide? I don't remember if we.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know, I don't know a ton about it, but Denver was the one they always drew parallels with at Dulles when they were talking about stuff. It's set up very much in the same way. You can't really see it from this context, but the terminals are all kind of stacked on top of each other, east-west facing, just 3 of them like that, and then they had taxi lanes that were in between the 2 terminals. They would push out onto a taxi lane, and then they would get taxi instructions to the edge, and then they would go call ground just like they do at Dulles. The only difference with Denver is that Denver was like, oh, we work a little bit more traffic, we're so cool, but like they got 4 taxi lanes in their big middle ramp area, so they can push out onto a taxiway or onto a taxi lane, block nothing, and then whenever they're ready, they just move over to the taxi thing, and then they can just move on unimpeded. Whereas Dulles was much more unpleasant because anything you pushed was immediately in your way. But other than that, it functions essentially the same as Dulles, to my knowledge.
Kansas City. I get to talk about this one. So Kansas City, like I said, is now the second. We were the second. We were the newest. Now we're the second newest ramp control in the U.S. The newest is actually Nashville, which is ran by the same company that ran MCI here. For those of you who didn't know, yeah, Nashville now has ramp control. Did not used to, does now. So we had a decent little setup here. So each side, this is an incomplete version of the ramp. There is plans to eventually run these lines straight. down here to taxiway Delta, and then run this as like a 90-degree corner. So we have these basically looking the same but flipped over, except these would go straight out to Delta. And there's plans for one more taxi lane to go in right down here that they were going to call Hotel to come over here to the de-icing area. There's so many plans, but there's also so much construction. And you can kind of see it. I clipped it a little bit, but down here they have this taxi lane Delta 3 that runs all the way out, and they've kind of gotten it closer, but there's still a bunch of construction there. We again had a problem similar to Dulles that things just got blocked very quickly. So if somebody pushed out of Bravo 45 onto this November 1 line, and nobody came in to Bravo 45, 47, 49, or 51 unless we were able to move them over to this line. And even then, it was like maybe, because sometimes they'd be too afraid to go behind the airplane, whole bunch of stuff. And then if both sides pushed, then everything was just completely blocked until people moved. I have a really good example of that coming up in a few slides here when we go over some scenarios. Whiskey over here, this lane, this was our main lane for these back gates right here. So everyone, they'd go either way. You can see there's actually a split here. So the non-movement area is right here. We split the ramp control north-south. When I was there, they were never split. We always worked them combined because it really didn't make a whole lot of sense to be combined. But how do they push at a Bravo 51? Is this a question for Kansas City or a different airport? Whoever asked this question. It probably, it could be here, but whoever asked that question, if you could speak up and say if that's a question for Kansas City, because I will answer that if it is. If it's for a different airport, then I will not.
So I don't have
cool.
a Bravo 51, so
yeah. So
I got a
Bravo 51
jet gate, but
so that's a good question. So Bravo 51, 49, Alpha 8, and Alpha 10 all had the problem of the blast fence that was not long enough to cover their pushes. So you can see this depiction of November 1, 2, and 3 is actually accurate for where they're lit. I don't know why they did this, but this is also where the disconnect lines are. So Alpha 49, 51, 10, and 8, and 10, they were instructed to push and then pull forward to a disconnect line where they'd place their nose wheel, and that was required for everybody who pushed off of those gates. If you were those gates, the largest I could fit on one of those gates, I think was a 7.5, and I think it was Alpha 8, but not most of the gates at Kansas City cannot fit larger than a 321 or a Max 9, maybe a Max 10 actually, but they can't fit anything larger. So they would get pushed onto November 1, and their instruction was push tail south, pull to the disconnect line, and then advise better to taxi. So that's what we would do. Nashville ramp is RVA, Connor. That's who works MCI as well. That's who I used to work for. So yeah, that's how 51 worked here. Same thing was the case at 57, 59, 12, and 14. You could push on to Delta 2, November 2 without the issue, but we kind of insisted on using November 1, November 3 when we could because it made for a better flow of the ramp. These Mike 1, Mike 3 were probably the biggest choke point because both ramp controls, both sides wanted to use it depending on the flow of the airport. So if we were departing one left, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to ask guys to push this way and then taxi like this just to get flipped around. So we kind of had this joint use of Mike 1, Mike 3 between the two positions, which is, again, why they were very rarely decombined most of the time. Ian asked what's the use of November 2. I went into that a little bit there. It is for larger jets. 757s and up are required to use that line. Anyone can use that line, but if it was in a design group 4 or larger, they had to use November 2, and nothing could pass them on November 1 or November 3. And I actually have a little scenario of that moving on here about what happens when that goes wrong. Yeah, this is Kansas City. I enjoyed working this ramp. It wasn't very busy. Over here we had all the de-icing spots. At some point this is all supposed to be controlled by the ramp there, but it isn't yet. because taxiway delta's in the way here. So right now ramp is supposed to line up de-icers over here on Lima, and then ground will take them on delta to wherever they need to go, and then they deal with it like that. Cool. That's KC. Whoop. Tampa. Eric, you wanted to talk about Tampa.
Oh yeah, Tampa is a perfect example of a place that has a non-movement area marked very clearly on its diagram, even if it's like FAA NACO. If that's something right. I think that's the right acronym. The FAA chart, which often doesn't have many markings. Ironically, actually, this Navigraph chart has almost no markings, and the FAA one has lots of markings. Usually, Navigraph is much better at depicting it. But anyway, the point is, they do not have a ramp control. So this is a case where the pilot may or may not call ground. They may or may not actually push onto a taxiway. They may push into, like you see, taxi lane Zulu up there. Stuff is named, but like it's all completely uncontrolled. So it's kind of hard to tell unless you know how a particular place works. But there's no separation services provided in any of the ramps at Tampa, even though it's got some of the infrastructure for it to be able to.
Kennedy. You have yourself down for Kennedy.
Yeah, not that I know anything about it, but had my guy Alex refer me to my guy Logan to kind of lay it out. Just as a, I thought it was a good example because they have a real nice mix of different, people living in happy harmony with each other. You see, like the airlines. This also I didn't put an asterisk, but before anyone corrects me for Terminal 7, British Airways Speedbird Kennedy is not there anymore. Logan was not sure who did that one anymore, but at least a couple months ago or whatever, you could see like American, British, JetBlue, they all kind of controlled their own terminals, and then there was the Port Authority that did the others. So, from terminal to terminal, ramp to ramp, even in the same airport, it often will be completely different, unrelated people who are actually controlling it, and they may even be doing it in a very different way. Like they could be using totally different phraseology or totally different techniques. It all just depends.
Newark. Newark is a really interesting one, and I'll talk about it as briefly as I can because we have been going for a little bit, but I find this one particularly interesting. So we talked about earlier the expanded ramp procedures. I'm not going to read this blurb. It's on the Navigraph chart if you really care to. But this main dotted line is the actual depiction of the non-movement area. This is where the line is painted on the ground, and that is where the movement area starts and ends. This gray line out here is for the expanded ramp procedures. And you can see it takes up quite a bit of the movement area. So what this allows is for the ramp control there to use that space to better sequence airplanes in and out so that they can be more effective. Credit to my friend Malik Alotabi. He's and because for those of you who don't know him, he's a 777FO on United. So he's talked to me a lot about how this ramp works, and it's a really interesting one. A few cool things that they have, a few others have as well, that are ran by United is they have what they call silent pushes, where instead of calling on a frequency and having to be all sad and tired and go ramp, hey, it's United 988 heavy push. They just send an ACARS message and it appears on the screen of the ramp controller that United 988 at 132 is ready for push. And then the ramp controller sees that and will key up on. They'll send a response. Typically, with the frequency that you're supposed to monitor, it'll be monitor 123.85, whatever it is, and then the ramp controller will call them and then issue their push. Newark is really heavily spot focused, at least on this side. So a lot of push to spot 4, spot 8, whatever else. Sometimes it'll be pushed to a spot and then have them taxi out to hold somewhere to clear the spot for whatever reason. There's There's a whole bunch of things that the ramp control here will do, and you can see they get this little ballpark area, and this is a great place where they like to hold airplanes. And it basically just, I mean, stops ground from having to do their job, if you ask me. That I guess the area was too congested, and it just made more sense to give it to ramp. So that's what they did. Over here, Terminal A. This is the new terminal in Newark. This is also ran by RVA, so this is one of the newer ramp controls in the NAS. You can see the old terminal building was right here, the old Terminal A, and it's gone now. This is all new as well. Whoop, I broke it. There we go. This thing is going to drive me nuts. Okay, there we go. So this area is all controlled by RVA, and this is, again, this is a little bit of a different, you can see their expanded ramp procedures look a little different. They don't take much of the movement area here. It really just encompasses the regular non-movement area. So this they have marked as the communication zone, which I think is a very cool name. But it's basically the split line. That's where they should be switching from ground to ramp. And then Terminal B here, I think we decided was Port Authority NJNY, NYNJ, whoever it is, Car 99, whoever it is.
New York's first because they're better.
Yeah. Okay, so New Jersey, New York, right here. And this one's kind of an interesting one too. They'll call up and say, depending on the gate and where they're going, a lot of the times if they're coming to this north one, they're supposed to call this 2285 frequency. Hey, here's the gate we're coming to, and they'll say, okay, contact 129.57 to come into this side. And I believe this frequency is a United frequency, while this one is Port Authority, New York, New Jersey. So it's a little bit of a switchy floppy over there, kind of interesting. All right, we're gonna move on to a few scenarios. Thank you all for your time. So I know we've been going for a little bit, but hopefully this is entertaining. So these are a couple scenarios that we both came up with for our respective airports. You'll see they'll look a little bit different because of the people who made them. So this is just a couple of problems that we might have seen. What are we saying about RVA? Who owns what? What company? Oh, I answered that. I see what's going on. So this situation here, this is a pretty common situation at MCA. Everyone blue here is outbound, everyone red is inbound, and these two red guys. This guy wants to go to like Bravo 59 over here. This guy wants to come up here to Bravo 56. So there's a plane in everybody's way basically, and the kind of general idea is how do you get what is the most efficient way, keeping in mind all those things we talked about earlier in developing a plan, taxiway restrictions and undue delay and all that stuff. So the thing that is definitive is these airplanes can pass each other on Sierra 1 and Sierra 3. That is something we did quite a lot. So we're allowed to let pass people. We're allowed to let people pass each other on Sierra 1, Sierra 3 here, and on Delta 1, Delta 3. So it kind of depends on who calls you for taxi here first, but my plan in this situation would probably be to move these two out of the alleyway as soon as I can so that this guy can get moved into the alleyway, because these two definitely can't pass each other because of how far forward this guy is, right? So this isn't going to work unless he kind of does this weird nonsense, which is totally doable. But my idea here would definitely be to move these guys out of the way, let this guy get in, let this guy push after he's gone into the gate. There's a lot of different schools of thought here. The way that it was instilled to us at Kansas City, the way that our management wanted us to work the ramp, we were supposed to put a little bit more priority on getting arrivals to the gate. Because for most of the airlines, once the jet bridge came back, they had hit their off-block time. They didn't care about the on-time performance anymore once the jet bridge was back. If we caused a delay, it was our delay. They didn't deal with it. So the idea here was about the actual people on the airplane. So the arrival, these people have been on the plane for 3-4 hours already. Get them to the gate. Let them start getting them off the plane. Making the departure wait an extra 30 seconds isn't going to cause any undue delay. So that was the train of thought for us is, when it was basically everything equal, we gave priority to the arrival. And then these guys up here, so like I said, my guy over here in Lima wants to come to Bravo 56. This is the biggest problem for me because I think this is going to be a pretty decent delay situation to both of these aircraft. And the other question is, where do they push, right? So there's a lot of conversation to be had about where they could and couldn't push. Like I said, most of these ramps were combined a lot of the time. So somebody over here at Bravo 60 could push all the way back here so that they could exit like this. And this guy, once this area was cleared, could push the same direction or opposite direction, and they could both use Mike 1 and Mike 3 to exit instead of, the follow the leader game down here. Or you could play the follow the leader game. You push, wait for this guy to start. A thing you definitely come up with a lot on ramp control is learning how much time different airplanes take to start their engines. Maxes take forever. If it was a max 8, we expected an extra 3 or 4 minute delay before they could taxi. If it was a 700 or an 800, a 737 800, they were ready to taxi basically by the time the tow bar disconnected. So those guys were snappy. And it depended on the airline too. United would take ages. American would take ages. Delta was pretty snappy. Southwest was, I don't know. Southwest seemed like they always had to pee their pants and that they needed to get to their destination so they could go pee. They always taxied at 90 knots and ridiculous stuff. So it's all about that kind of stuff and taking that into account. So if these are two max 8s right here, honestly, I'd move this guy out, move this guy out, move this guy out. Let this guy go in, push, let this guy go in, and push. Similar concept. And like I said, two options here. You go deep to right there, or you could have them go just to a regular push, have this guy go to a regular push. The only incorrect move is letting this guy push first behind this guy. If you're blocking people into a gate, that is step one to undo delay for no reason. Even if this one calls you first, right? This comes down to an operational advantage. There's no reason to delay the push of the guy to his left because the guy to his right called first. Unless, he called first and he issued the push and then he called, right? But if they're both sitting and waiting for this guy to move, then there's no reason that we don't go to 60 first and tell them to push deep and tell 62 to push shallow and have them be a little conga line with each other. So that's a little scenario. This is a pretty common thing that would happen at Kansas City for us. People holding out, waiting for their gate, and we'd, have these one-way exits where people could only go out this way, create a little line, and have to clear out the intersection like this. A radar detector on the ramp, that's you think that's not a thing, but we had ADS-B detectors that were in our things. So we actually did have a ground radar for our ramp stuff. It wasn't a radar, it was an ADS-B thing, and you might be able to see it. This is another situation. It's kind of hard to see this guy. I picked a bad color. But this right here is a Delta 757, and this is a true story. The first day of the season that Delta brought 757s to Kansas City, they pushed the airplane back in such a horrible way that they jackknifed the tow, and the only way to get it off the airplane was to physically break it off the airplane, and then that required them to get a new tow, pull it back into the gate, and replace the nose gear. It was about an hour process. The issue is here, all of these guys are trying to get places. So my red guy out here wants to come over to Bravo 49, and he's currently being blocked. Can the red plane on Sierra 3 taxi to Delta 2, or is it possible to direct the blue plane on Delta 3? So you mean back here? Delta 2, there's not enough room to pass two airplanes by each other. Only Delta 1, Delta 3. Delta 2 was only meant for larger wingspan aircraft. Same thing with Sierra 2 here. So if you wanted aircraft to pass each other, they had to be on the 1s or the 3s. The 2s would just block the whole alleyway. So yeah, this situation caused a lot of delay here. What this doesn't show is there actually wound up being like a line of 5 airplanes holding out on the movement area waiting for the 757 to move, and then 3 airplanes that are deep in the ramp waiting to move, 1 ready to move, 3 that were holding their push. And then this Bravo 48 guy. These 2 could move, right? So this guy was able to go out in front. There was enough room to use this to get out in front here. And this guy. So we kept moving up here. But this guy wanted to come in here, so he was forced like this. And eventually we had to call the ground control. We did talk about it, John. Pardon you. Maybe you weren't paying attention. We did talk about the green line and the orange line at Seattle. It was like slide 3. So this guy wanted to come in, he couldn't. So eventually we wind up coordinating with ground, and they, come in. We had them bring them up Golf, down Alpha, and then swing them back around. And we wound up having them come into Mike 3 and hold on the ramp right here. And that worked a little bit better while these guys were figuring out their stees. This is one of those situations where you just kind of have to eat the delays. There's nothing you can do. No one can pass this airplane. It's a 757 sitting on the middle line. Nothing can pass on the middle line. There's equipment all throughout these RON spots. For those who don't know, RON stands for remaining overnight. So those spots were used when aircrafts were to, you guessed it, remain overnight. So they couldn't move. Nobody could move. It was basically a stalemate, and all you had to do here was sit and wait. This situation led to 5 or 6 airplanes getting held out on the movement area, and led to them all coming in at the same time, and led to this situation where we had 5 guys who were all in the same alleyway who wanted to push. And there's a little video here, and I'll show you the actual solution and how I solved it. I was on position for this particular thing. So first was this guy off of Bravo 49 actually got pulled forward. And I instructed, originally, this guy here at Alpha 6 had called for push. I had issued the instruction to push next to this guy, and their ground crew refused for whatever reason. So the eventual solution looked a little like this. And like I said, we had a little ground radar. I think, come on, this is not gonna do the thing. Hold on. Come on. I guess I can't. Hello? There we go. So, like I said, we actually did have an ADSB ground surveillance thing, where it let us see airplanes on the ground. So this was what we had. So you could see we have SkyWest here. He pushed first. Oh, dang it. I knew that was going to happen to me because I literally messed with this the other day and did the same thing. So SkyWest here pushed first off of Bravo 49 here, and this American 1619 called for push. I told them to push next to this guy. The ground crew refused a clearance. So that's what happens. The ground crew refuses a clearance. We can't do anything. Alaska calls for push and accepted the clearance. So I was like, okay, go. I'm not delaying this Alaska for no reason because the American was scared. So the SkyWest goes. This United up here calls for push. And then I go back to this American on this gate and I say, hey, the SkyWest is gone, but there's that Alaska next to you and the United across the alleyway. Will they push now? And I can tell that so all of this is based on relative movement. So you can see that they kind of flip around. So in this situation, I tell the American what's going on, and I can tell. No, it wasn't all that confusing because we were used to the relative movement. We complained about it, but they didn't do anything about it. So I tell this American about the situation, and I can tell the captain's getting annoyed with the ground crew. So he accepts a new clearance now to push in front of the Alaska, behind the United, to the next line over on the far side of the alleyway, which is a significantly more dangerous clearance. Not that it was dangerous at all to begin with, but this is way crazier than the push next to the guy across the alleyway. So they eventually accept the clearance, and then right when these guys start pushing, this guy calls for push. And I've run out of space here, right? Because this Alaska pushed a while ago, and I don't want to block him in, and I've lost my way to go to the parallel taxi lane here. So I decided that I'd ask this American whether their ground crew were comfortable pushing over here. This doesn't do a lot of greatness for the scale here. Pushing off of Alpha 4 to this is November 4 wasn't super common, so I had to make sure that the ground crews were happy with this clearance, and they were. And you can see a bunch of other stuff. I'm working the whole ramp here, so the Southwest calls for taxi. Yeah, you're right, Joe. You are right. This software is called Aerobon, and yeah, it just isn't very smart. It uses relative movement. I complained about it; they didn't like it. So this is the situation that winds up happening. Everyone pushes, and United 626 wants to come in. We're out of space. There's nowhere else for them to go, so now he's stuck just kind of waiting for everybody to move. So that's what happens. He winds up sitting. This is up to like 200 times speed, so this This winds up being like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. He sits waiting for the conga line to move. So Alaska moves out of the way. They're obviously the first, so they go first. They're ready first. And then the United calls. The American called first, then United called, and United called very quickly. So I just had everybody follow the leader here. So United follows Alaska, American follows United, and then by the time that this all moves out of the way, this guy's ready to taxi, so he follows his company. And this United 626 is about ready to taxi, or now has nothing blocking him, and these guys can pass each other. So this is the end result. Everybody moves out of his way. They all go to the runway, and he goes to the gate. Yeah, this is called Aerobon. This is not my favorite software that we use, but it was good enough, and it's a good view there of some interesting ramp control stuff. Go back to this, and I will reopen the question thing in case people still want to ask questions. There we go. Mr. Quinn.
All right. Well, I'll try to make it somewhat expedited. I know you guys have been here for a while. Maybe you're having fun because you're nerds like we are, like I said. But just try to pick up the pace to some extent. Dulles, airplanes. I guess maybe I could have been sensitive to like color blindness. I don't know. Red, green, I guess I didn't do. I don't know if green, yellow is a problem. If it is, I apologize. Green guys going to the left, yellow guys going to the right. You can see the little spots I marked there. So you got spot 80 at the bottom left and spot 70, 78. Is that right? Yeah, okay. I gotta like turn myself around because you're facing south. It's confusing to look at this north up because you would always face south in the tower. So in this configuration, this would be a 19 left, 30 up. So off the east side of the map is runway 19 left and 30 off the west. So yellow guys going to 19 left, that'd be all your south fixes, and all your guys going to north fixes are supposed to be going out the west side for 30, and they kind of call you and tell you what fix they're going to, or more accurately, they call you and say the gate they're at, and then they request pushback, and you're like, okay, but where are you going? And then they tell you, and then you figure out if they're a green or yellow, so to speak. So given this this position that we're in, kind of just go through each of the ones that I've circled there. So I guess they can't talk. They do have the chat thing. Maybe we'll do it like that. So just looking at this situation that we've got here, looking at number 1. This was a place that United always tried not to park people, the lovely Gate Delta 29. Or at least they would have if they had brains. Often, like the 5 gates at the end were empty, just like it is in this picture, and then there's one parked at Delta 29, and you're like, if he doesn't push first, I don't know how I'm supposed to do anything with him. And then inevitably, he would push like 2/3 of the way through the busiest departure push of the night. So I don't know. Guess it is what it is. Now that we are in this position, what are some ideas about how we can get him out? There's
We
really
could
only
do the
one
raise your
obvious
hand
solution to
thing
this.
here.
Yeah,
We
or
could do the raise your
you,
hand thing. Raise your hand if you have an idea.
you can also just type it out if you want to, but yeah, if anyone wants to use their voice, that would be even better.
Good, Ian.
So what I would probably do is wait for the first guy to exit the ramp, and then you could have the second guy join the parallel taxiway while you push number 1.
Not gonna lie, I have done that. It's a violation of the LOA because that's where the arrivals are supposed to come in. So we call it double barreling, which sometimes when ground wasn't playing nice, like you just put, you just do it. Just ram them down their throats and be like, well, I don't know, I've blocked it. So if you would take them out of the ramp, then this problem would be solved. And until you do, there's kind of nothing we can do. That's not. I didn't really give you the parameters to tell you that you couldn't do that, but that is a good solution if we break the rules. What's another? You have any other ideas? There's really not that
Back down
many.
in the audience.
Oh, okay. Tim is typing. I'll give Tim till the count of 10, and then I'm gonna shout an answer out. So if you're working on it, second plane, exactly. That's the move, and it's not very nice. There's not really anything you can do in this situation. You can either wait for the whole line to go by, or you pick an arbitrary point in the line where that person is screwed. So If it's, maybe you let 2 of them out and you tell the third one to hold position, you let the 2 go out as ground pulls them out, and then eventually you push Delta 29. Another good option here is maybe I let there's probably enough. Say we let 2 of them go out, and the number 3 guy is told to hold position, and then when we push Delta 29, we can have him push, face west on the center line, and push deep. So he's almost kind of like in between where 1 and 2 currently are, and then the current number 3 guy could go right to left around him. So while he's sitting on Delta, turning his engines on and stuff, I could take people and fish them around him, get them to spot 80, and ground can keep pulling people out rather than us just blocking the whole line. So a couple different ways to solve that one, but that's probably the least flexible of the options we have. Other suggestions? Let's see. Apric, a few guys out the north ramp. Yeah, they're not going to answer the line. Is the problem with that? It's a good plan, but if that were my answer, we're just going to do it really, because they're not going to answer the phone, especially to do us a favor. Why not let them all out first? You certainly could. It's in the 7110, right? Not that we're subject to the 7110, but it does say first come, first served, right? So whoever first called, like all those guys who are on the taxiway have been sitting there. So they have requested to get to the runway first. And if this guy's just asking right now, in theory, you could say all of those dudes are going to go out before you push, and he would probably be stuck there for 15, 20 minutes. But sometimes that's just how it is. It kind of depends on your mood and your view of what seems the most fair, because you don't want to. If you can screw over a couple people a little bit, sometimes that's better than like really screwing one guy hard. I feel like there's a joke in there somewhere. So many comments. Shane, are you reading this? Is there anything else good in there? Or can I move to the second one? Yeah, Joe says double barrel it all day. They get real grumpy is the thing, and they don't pull them out the ramp, and then it becomes like a whole thing, and then they're like yelling, why are you doing that? It's like, well, maybe if you put them out, like we have no space in here, and you got all the worst space in the world out there. But I digress. Number two. So he's a green guy, has to face west. What is tricky about number 2? I don't know. I don't see anything tricky about number 2. I feel like number 2, you just push him and he face west. I don't know why I circled him. Moving on to number 3. Yeah, okay, yeah. Number 3 is an interesting one, right? Because number 3's got to go to the yellow spot. So what do we think? I think voice is especially going to be good for this one if someone wants to come up with a plan and talk through what they would do and why they would do it that way, not a different way.
I'm probably not gonna bring you up to the stage unless you have roles in your name set here in the USA Discord. There are some people that don't have any roles or names here, so if you don't have it, I suggest you do that, and then I will bring you up to the stage.
John with the creative solution, which I appreciate for obvious reasons. With the zigging and zagging we do right to left between these lines, that was very strictly prohibited for us to push all the way across to the far line. I think Shane said that you can do that, right?
Yep, I mean, in the example I gave, we always pushed across the line, because I mean, it was not nearly as big as this gap right here, and there was another line here, so, and we did significantly less zigging and zagging, so yeah, we did it all the time.
Yeah, that's not to say that it hasn't been done, but yeah, they got very unhappy when they did that. Most people would not have accepted the clearance, but there was one old guy who thought he was smarter than everybody, and he did it like every once in a while, and he's like, "See, works fine." It's like, well, yeah, but like, I don't know, it's a bad idea. Mostly just because of the ground crews, they're gonna get run over or blown over as they're going back across. But let's see. Push him facing west on Delta, and then U-turn on Charlie once the yellow on Delta moves. That's a suggestion. And why would we face him west if he's going east? Not saying I agree or disagree. But what's the rationale there? And so for Kushiko, the yellow are just we have to sort airplanes that exit the ramp based on the fix that they're going to, because they're going to go to a different runway based on the direction of their route out of and away from the airport. So the yellow guys have to go to the yellow spot that's on the right side of the ramp, and the green guys have to go to the left. Oh, I guess they answered that. I should read better. Yes, John, you have a fair point. That would be an interesting maneuver to get him in that position. I kept moving people around. Okay, so Ian's answer. So he can move if green at C19 wants to push. Interesting. That's kind of A, not true, and B, not the answer that makes sense. Right? Because if we push number 3 and he faces west, then that means his tail is going to go kind of right behind that green guy. So the I guess I'll let you. Do you have an alternate theory? Because your plan's good, right? You're facing him west when he needs to go east. You're facing him the wrong way, but I would say that's the right way. I'll just give you my perspective. Our training was kind of the opposite of what Shane said, where for him the priority was to get people to the gate. For us, they wanted us to get people off the gate. Just get them pushed. I don't care how you push them, just push them. Get them off the gate. That starts the timer, and then we'll figure out how to get people where they need to go. So as I see this situation, I see from number 3, the guy who's just above and to the left. That guy might be ready to taxi soon, but I'm not going to hold number 3 just because he might be ready soon. Like if you can kind of tell from their cadence and how long they've been there, and you can see the engines are running, and you can see, when they test their flight controls, that's like moments away from taxiing. So maybe I'd hold number 3 if I saw that happening. But if he wasn't there yet, then number 3 is going to push, and I could face him kind of the same way that the yellow guy is facing, and they'd kind of be just right next to each other. But then 3 would be blocking him, and if I were to face him the other way, well, I guess the other yellow guy is kind of in the way, but still, if I were to face 3, the same way as the guy above and to his left, then he would be in his way, and the other guy could not move, the guy that Shane's pointing at. Whereas if I face 3 to the west on a 45-degree angle, then that traffic to the left has the ability to make a left turnout and go left onto the upper line there, Charlie. And that other plane that's up there has been pushed out for a while, so they can probably just follow each other out on Charlie right ahead to the spot. Easy peasy. And then when 3 is ready, even though he's facing west, they can taxi in a 180. So he would just make a big looping right 180 to join Charlie short of Juliet and be on his way. So that's what I would do for number 3. Number 4, who needs to go to the west? Yeah, so this one's kind of straightforward. Again, I think Ian is on the right track here. We don't really have any choices with 4. If we're going to push him, we can't push him to face west because that would put him into the yellow guy. So the only thing you can do really is go kind of straight back on the angle he's aimed at and continue to be aimed kind of easterly. And then he would need to get a loop-de-loop to get out of there. Otherwise, he doesn't really have any option. Number 5, this is an example of the thing I referenced earlier, right? We got all these little RJ gates and stuff, and so they can push off the gate partially, and there's like a little leader line that the number 5 guy is on, and his tail is short of the vehicle road. So he's not technically on a gate, but he is not anywhere near even the ramp area either. He's like in the parking area. He's still on the gate, so to speak. So this would be a case where I might tell him partial pushes approved, remain or hold short of the vehicle road. And then they come out there and they're holding a position, and then like you have all these yellow guys that are passing by him. And once you have room or maybe in this case we would just tell the second yellow guy to hold a beam alpha, whatever that is, alpha 20, alpha 14, or some other point. Like you could see the point where it splits out to Charlie 1. You could just say taxi straight ahead. You'll see a point on the ground labeled Charlie 1 stop with the nose gear on the sign. And then he'd just go there and stop. That gives you room to get that guy to complete his push. And then usually those are little RJs. You could just give him a right 180, left 180 to get him over out of the way to the other lane. So. And you can see how, obviously, since it's such a free-for-all, how you phrase this is what is usually tricky, and it's going to be phrased differently based on where you go. So as there were some previous conversations at Dulles, they would, most people would say transition to Charlie, transition to Delta, hold a beam this gate. I like to say join. So like if we were looking at that yellow guy just south of number 4, I would yeah, that one was the one I was looking at. So I would just tell him, I guess in that case, I'd just tell him taxi via Charlie and hold short at Juliet. He would go straight ahead. The guy down there, I would tell him turn left, join Charlie, and hold short at Juliet. Other places they'll say it differently. Other places they might not have this situation. That's only on this ramp, right? The north ramp that's above it is like Bravo. You're given instructions that sound like ground control, right? Taxi via Bravo, Alpha 2 Alpha, hold short of Alpha 4. Yes, Lauren has the ultimate solution, or the Denver solution, which is let me push onto 1 and let me taxi on another one. Even if they had 3 here, if I had like a middle lane, there would be infinitely less complexity, but such is life. So here we've zoomed out just a little bit to include the arrivals that are out there. Any thoughts on any of those? Let's see, maybe the yeah, I guess this isn't particularly hard, but like the one on the left, kind of going to do the same thing, right? He's got to come in on Charlie, which is that top line. He's going to be stuck behind that yellow guy, but when that yellow guy starts to move, he can start moving up toward his gate. This line that we got holding short of Delta, we're going to find out who is or isn't in the way and have him stop. So probably second from the end, I tell him to stop, hold position, let the line shuffle forward. And even what we would do, as long as they didn't pull up too snugly to each other, I could take that number 3 guy and the number 4 guy, have them do a right 180 onto Charlie and follow each other, get out of the way while the black one turns into his gate, and then have, Shane, if you want to trace for me, the number 3 and 4 guy would do a right 180 onto Charlie and go east, and then they would just go down, and then they'd eventually go right over to Delta. They do a left. I was gonna put them back right where I found them. So they're going east on Charlie. They join Delta, eastbound on Delta, and then they do a left 180 onto Charlie again, and then they come all the way back down, and then they pull back in the line right where they were, right? So I've kind of taken them on a scenic tour, but they're in the same spot on the line as they were before, and even though it's a bit of work, it gets that black guy to the gate rather than making him wait for forever. 2 on the right, yeah, I don't know, pretty straightforward. Keeping an eye on the people who want to push and not running traffic behind them, because that'd be a bummer. A bit of weave as necessary going on there. Pretty straightforward, I suppose. So I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. It's kind of like ground control, but not. It's a bit of a weird puzzle, and like I said, every position is different. This Charlie Delta position is kind of the most unique in the way that it's so flexible. So what's next? What else we got? Oh, that's it.
That's what we got for our scheduled content. There is some more stuff here. We just got pretty pictures of both of our ramp facilities. So if anyone's curious what those look like, stick around. And let's go through some of the questions that have come through that I didn't address because they didn't have anything to do with exactly what we were talking about. So this doesn't seem like a question. I'm not gonna lie to you. But yeah, thank you, thank you for a
Much
statement.
appreciated. Love that.
Thank you. Let's see. I will try and go in order in which these were submitted. So we'll go all the way back to the beginning. We answered some of these. Does ramp control with FAA as a controller or something else? I assume this question is ramp control FAA or not? We talked about this, obviously. Most ramp controls are managed by the airport authorities or the airlines. Generally, and not generally, it is not the FAA. Never will be. They don't like it.
Yeah.
This is a good question for Eric, and I actually know this one too. There's a website.
Sure is. my.something/jobs, I think. I don't know. my.com jobs? Who knows? Search
Yeah,
my jobs on Google
yeah.
and you'll find it.
They come up every so often. A good point. There you go. Ian posted MWAL careers. A good thing to
There
note
we go.
about this one. There is a qualification. You either need some sort of prior experience or to be a CTI grad. I believe were the minimum requirements at the time. The last time I tried to apply for this job, so you do need some sort of a traffic background or formal education in traffic control. Otherwise, they probably won't even consider you for the position.
Yeah, and if you are interested, the official name of that position is ramp controller and mobile lounge dispatcher. I think it's ramp controller / mobile lounge dispatcher. That's the name of the position that gets you up in the tower. And I think you can, like through their little website, you can set up for like emails or something. So if you could filter it or something, it'll send you an email when it opens. And I think they hire maybe like every other year or so.
I've seen them. It came through twice. It came through once a year for a little while. I don't know what they're doing right now, but just kind of depends. I think they're cycling more CTI grads, so their turnover's a little higher. We answered that one. I'll pull this one up, but it's just not really one for us to answer. I'll let one of the VATUSA people. I think John's still here. Yeah, John, if you're not asleep, this is a question for VATUSA.
The short version here too is that it's different entities, right? Everything we do with our top-down system is because it's all FAA stuff, and this is not an FAA position. I think is probably the reason that they haven't historically.
So, I can give kind of a general answer. In GCAP, the new policy, ramp control positions are kind of officially defined now. So, if facilities have a desire specifically to staff those ramp positions more widely, that's a decision that the facility management can make. And I'd be happy to kind of consult on any facility that is thinking about doing that.
There you go.
Thank you, John. All right. This is a good one. If you work ramp control, do you also work as a ramp agent, etc.? So I'm gonna answer this question twofold. Depending on which path you go down to get to a ramp control tower. So if you go through the airlines, a lot of them will take people who were on the line, ramp agents, gate agents, above the wings, below the wings, whatever, and they look for them to come into their towers. American, I know, especially likes to do that. Delta will do that sometimes as well. They want you to sling bags for them for a little while. But as a ramp controller, if that is your job, you're not also going to be slinging bags generally. If your job title is ramp control, they won't be like, "Oh, we need you down on the ramp today." You'll be upstairs most of the time. But there are certain ramp control towers, especially the ones that are ran by the airlines, that have kind of their ops stuff built into it. So Eric, who did not work for United Airlines but worked at a primarily United airport, would always get a call from United 422 who really wanted catering, and Eric would have to tell him, "Sir, I have nothing to do with your catering." Some ramp towers do have something to do with their catering. You call them, you're like, "Hey, we'd like catering," and they go, "Okay, we'll send somebody." Blah 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 blah. So you won't be slinging bags as a ramp controller. You might have to do that to work up to that, but generally, if you're a ramp controller, you're a ramp controller. You're in the tower, or in my case, in the room that I'll show you here in a second. Let's see. Is there an age requirement for ramp? Yeah, I mean, just whatever the company requires. 18 for most jobs out there, and there's no mandatory retirement at I don't think any of these ramps, unless the company itself had a mandatory retirement age.
There's
But
usually a medical requirement too, but it's not like FAA level. It's not even a class 3.
It also depends. We did not have a medical requirement, but I know of a bunch of ramp towers that did have a medical requirement. So just depends on the company and what they're looking for and how critical you are to the operation. Why are spot / ramp numbers not on FAA charts? That's a really good question. There are some that are, but it really just comes down to bureaucracy. It's a lot of work to put them onto the FAA charts, and it's actually not a lot of work to put them onto the Navigraph charts. Or For those of you who don't know the whole story here, Navigraph pulls charts from Jeppesen, and I've actually been a part of submitting charting to Jeppesen. It's really pretty easy. You send, as long as you're validated by the airport authorities, an official source to send charts. You send them charting, and they go okay, and then they publish it. They will do some amount of work to validate that it's not incredibly accurate, but it's a lot easier to get Jeppesen stuff done than FAA. And generally, most airlines use Jeppesen. They don't use FAA charts, so it's what most airports focus on is getting Jeppesen charts up to date because it doesn't matter as much. But there are certain FAA charts. So if you look at Seattle, it'll have a decent amount of the ramp information on the FAA chart. Not even all the ramp frequencies will be listed on most FAA charts. You'd have to find your way to the Jeppesen charts because, in theory, it is airline specific. GA don't need the ramp frequency. We actually did, and so did Dulles because they had aircraft transition the ramp. We had customs inside the ramp, so whenever we'd get, Charlie Golf Bravo Foxtrot Lima coming in from Odonchino, Canada, they'd come in and we'd have to guide them to the customs gate, which was kind of a real hassle for us. But so occasionally you do have to deal with people who don't have the charting for the ramp and don't know the spots, don't know the taxi lanes. So that is something that will happen on occasion. What is the phraseology?
Or are you going by like vote order?
I'm going in order of whatever pops up on my screen that we already haven't talked about.
Okay, but you're doing all of them?
There's only one more that we haven't done yet.
Oh, okay.
What is the phraseology for telling someone to taxi to a spot where to exit the ramp? We talked about this a little bit. Taxi. That's the phraseology. Again, no ramp control is bound by the .65, and there is no ramp control documentation out there. So the answer to what is the phraseology is it depends on the ramp control. It depends what the company running the ramp control has decided their standard phraseology is going to be. And that's what it comes down to. But generally, it's taxi, taxi to, taxi via, taxi hold short of, taxi, so on and so forth.
Yep. Taxi 172 via Bravo, Alpha 2, Alpha, Alpha 4, Bravo.
Echo, 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 echo 1, echo, echo, echo.
Oh yeah,
echo,
that's my favorite clearance. Here's a real clearance. Are you guys ready for this? Taxi via Echo, Echo 2, Echo, Echo 3. Oh god, no, I stumbled through it. Echo, Echo 2, Echo, Echo, hold short of Echo 3. It's pretty nice. Or even like taxi via Echo, Echo 3, Echo, Echo, Echo 2, hold short of Echo. That's also real, but like no one's gonna ever understand that. It's pretty crazy. Of course, those taxiways don't exist anymore, so it's kind of a moot point. But Houston's real bad with their double letters too. Trash.
Oh yeah, it's a nightmare. Romeo Sierra, Romeo Romeo, Romeo Delta, stuff like that.
Disgusting.
What do you think the best way is to design a terminal, specifically the most efficient ramp operations? That's a fantastic question. I think there's one ramp in the entire country that has gotten anywhere near what is probably the most efficient way to do it, and it's Denver. I mean, it's really tough because you always have to sacrifice something for something else. But Denver's quad line setup is probably the most ideal because it makes it so easy, especially since they all have wingtip from each other. It's just stupid easy. What do you think, Eric? What's the best way to design a ramp? He's distracted typing. So move on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a loaded question. I would agree though. I mean I would have said that Dulles was very well designed with like a few caveats. One being you should be able to have like one more lane. You don't need 4 like Denver has, but you need 3. You got to be able to push both sides and then have an extra line to taxi, even just for the small stuff. Like it only has to be 737 capable, and the big guys have to be on the outers. But that would make it so much more efficient.
That is every question. We'll move on to some pretty stuff. I'm gonna close the questions so we get a full screen here.
How many hours is this?
14. We got about 14 more hours to go. But you guys, we're done with content.
This is all just
Yeah, this is
pretty
just
pictures.
yeah, pretty pictures. So no more information, just some cool stuff. If you guys are interested in what ramp towers look like. So this is the ramp tower. This is actually what my ramp tower looked like. So as you guys can see, it's not a traditional tower. It is just a camera mast here. So my ramp tower was the second in the United States to be a virtual ramp tower, and virtual is a terrible name. I prefer the term remote. But basically, we had two of these camera masts. These are 14 cameras on each of these, and then two on top, so 16 total, which gave us a 360 view on two sides of the ramp. So this is the south side, this is the north side. And this is what our room looked like. So we had a computer with three screens. We had our little radio comms panels down here, a phone, speaker. This was how we kind of manipulated this big setup here, multi computers. So this was we are the first facility to have this dual setup here with dual 360 views. Houston had a different view. Houston has a similar setup to this, but they had a different camera setup. So they had 180s instead of 360s. What happens when it's cloudy? There's some pictures that Eric will show you what happens when it's cloudy. We didn't have many issues, but when it's cloudy, you do what you do in air traffic. You can't see. You work with paper stops and stuff like that. So yeah, this is what we had. Aerobon is down here. Some of you are familiar with that. It was our surface detection tool and also gave us good scheduling and stuff like that. This is opening night, I think, so we did not have a whole lot of airplanes over here. This was like very, very soon after we opened. Here's a little bit of a full view of the north side here. So this edge of the roof, you can't quite see it, but connects up to this edge of the roof. And this was our view. We had 4 extra cameras that were placed elsewhere to help us see things that we couldn't see from the normal cameras, and then 2 that were specifically designed to pan, tilt, and zoom very well, so that we could zoom in on stuff, see the tower controllers picking their nose over here. So this was a cool setup that we had. This is my water bottle, just chilling there. This is opening night. This is just a cool picture. This is all of the Southwest special liveries that they bothered to bring in, so quite a few. This is, I believe this is Heart 1, maybe Heart 2, one of the two. This is obviously the Herb Keller, for those of you familiar. It's the gold one. Texas, or Lone Star 1, Maryland 1, Florida 1, and Missouri 1. And then this is the side from it: Florida 1, Missouri 1, Maryland 1, Lone Star 1, and the Herb D. Keller. So they all set in a line, and these were the first 6 flights out the next morning as well. A couple other cool little pictures. There's Heart 1 again, and the Triple Crown livery. And then who knows what this airplane is? I love this picture. Anybody can tell me what that is?
Hello?
No.
It looks like.
It does.
Is it a foreign?
This is, yeah, there we go. 2 of them. This is the L-1011. Here's the third engine right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant if it was a
No.
specific airplane, like
No. It's not. It's not an
Prime
airline.
Minister
Actually,
of something.
Prime Minister of Djibouti. No, it's just a. We use this. It works, but they have it stored over here. You can kind of see they have a graveyard over here, and it just kind of sits over there as a thing to show. But it just sits there, and they call it the TriStar experience. So you can go up in the TriStar and check it out. But they towed it in to make sure that a heavy could fit down this taxi lane and then park at the heavy gate over here. So this was all before we opened the ramp officially. But yeah, cool little L-1011. Here's Eric's little babies.
Yeah, she's so pretty. There's a bunch of towers. Like, if anyone cares, when you look at Dulles, there's like a whole bunch of towers. There's like the classic, iconic one that you see in all the pictures that you'll see in a moment. That's like the historic tower, which unfortunately is totally vacant. Very tragic. And then there's the giant tower that is like south of all the terminals that they built to replace the historic tower when the historic tower was too small to accommodate all the positions that they had to have open. And then there's this tower that is the main ramp tower, which is the tall, good one, real big inside. And then there's a little tiny one that's on top of the Charlie Delta concourse. We call that the Echo Tower because it works the Echo Fox position, and it's I don't know, like 15, 20 feet above the terminal building, so it's not a very good view. You can't see hardly any of the gates, actually. It's pretty unsafe, but regardless. So here we are inside. That's Greg. Just a real foggy morning. Sometimes it's like this. This isn't really specific to a ramp tower, but I don't know. I just always love when it got foggy like that. And this is one of the few pictures that I actually had of the inside, so you could see what it looked like. So we're facing south here, so the Charlie Delta position would be there's like on the wall that's kind of to the right-ish. There's like two like positions that you can see, and the third one to the right is the Charlie Delta position. The Echo Fox guy would work at the left one when it wasn't over in the other tower, but usually it was. And then behind us is where the Alpha Bravo and the Mobile Lounge dispatcher is, like in the corner to our left. So there you go. What is this? Can't even tell if we're facing north or south. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're facing south. Oh yeah, you can see the Echo Tower kind of if you squint real hard. Yeah, so we're facing south. So this is by the Charlie Delta position.
You thank Eric for
Yeah.
this slide?
Yes, there's many. Just generally pretty pictures. This one's actually kind of interesting because you can see a little bit of like integration between the airline world and the ramp control world, right? So this is in the ramp tower, but that stuff you see on the bottom with the screens, that's all United software. So they um, obviously have all the information on when their flights are going to arrive and scheduled to depart and what their flight numbers are and what gate they're parking at. And so this was really helpful for us for situational awareness, especially when you're working the Charlie Delta position, because half or more of your airplanes are going to be United. And so even if they aren't like showing signs of activity, like they haven't turned the beacon lights on, there aren't like ground crew walking around pulling the chocks away, and there's like movement at the jetway and stuff. Even if there aren't those clues, you can see how long an airplane's going to be there. So you can kind of plan it. You can see what the whole push is going to look like, more or less. So if there's a guy on that dreaded Delta 29 gate who's always stuck by spot 80, this thing will show me roughly when he is scheduled to push, and inevitably he's going to push in the middle of the bank, and then he's just going to be stuck there and screwed. And then we chuckle and say, "I don't know why you did that to yourself." But yeah, nice sunset. Another nice sunset. Lots of nice sunsets. Oh, little
Ooh,
rainbow action.
rainbow.
Love that. Yep. See a little mobile lounge down there. Cute little guy. Also, that's actually a real good picture. Go back to that one. When I said that it's not a dang bus, it's enormous. Like look at the little car that's parked right next to the little tiny bus. Thing's a beast. The tires are like about as tall as I am. Anywho, yeah, I guess it rained
Ooh.
and sunset. That's a nice one. The A380, which I still maintain is the ugliest airplane on planet Earth, looks like a whale, hideous. Across the hall from what I believe to be the prettiest airplane in the world, which is the 747. Long live Boeing, despite their recent mistakes.
I think it's the
Also, real
cockpit
cool,
placement.
huh?
It's the cockpit placement for me. I mean, just it being on top versus it being on the bottom here, it just
Maybe
looks
that's what it is. It's the nose that's wrong. If you ignore the nose, I don't really have much of an opinion. But yeah, the nose is hideous versus beautiful. Nice wall of rain, I guess is why I took this one.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah, there you go. This is the stuff. So just see them coming in, little landing lights on the parallel finals. Took like a time lapse one time from the I don't know if I should say this, but my badge got me all sorts of places, and so I would go up to the historic tower sometimes and eat dinner there. And I took a time lapse up there of like all the guys coming in for they were landing trips at the time, and it was beautiful. And then I lost it, so can't share that with you. Apologies.
bad. Oh my God.
Oh
What's
yeah.
going on with this one?
Why is it all blurry? That's sad.
Let me see something. Yeah, it's weird. Maybe it's the scale.
Oh, maybe.
Oh yeah, it is scaled up like crazy.
Oh. Maybe. Oh well. Well, you can see the idea. If you just squint your eyes so you can't see the detail, you get the idea. Just nice, pretty aura fog situation. Pretty nice. Oh yeah. So
That's
there
a
you go.
historic tower.
There's the classic view of the historic tower and the terminal building there. It's the main terminal, which doesn't really have any gates attached to it. It's just like a big empty hallway with ticketing and whatever.
Mobile lounges.
Mobile lounges on the south side.
There they are.
Here we go. So this is my classic iconic Dulles picture. The beautiful rainbow over the terminal and the historic tower and good old Springbok 208 heavy.
What's going on here? Hello? Respond? Is that it? That's it.
That's it.
That's all we got. All right, well, I'll go back to our little goodbye slide. Thank you all for coming on the way longer journey than I thought that would be. I didn't think that would take us 2 hours, but it did. And you know what? I don't care. I had time. Anyone have any more questions they want to answer or they want to ask? Feel free to just raise your hand. We'll bring you up to the stage. But yeah, if no one has anything that they want to talk about, we hope you all enjoyed.